Hello, everyone. My name is Drew Woods, and I'm the co-chair of the Education Committee on the AOC PM&R's Resident Council. I'm very excited to start this new programming, which we have dubbed the Freeway to Fellowship, in which we will explore the various fellowship opportunities that are available to PM&R residents. Our hope is that with these virtual conversations, that we'll be able to help you navigate your own process and get you to the fellowship of your dreams. So with that, it's my privilege today to be joined by Dr. Stephen Kirshblum, who is the chair of the Rutgers-Kessler PM&R residency program, as well as the program director for the Spinal Cord Injury Medicine Fellowship. Dr. Kirshblum completed his residency at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York and joined the Kessler Institute in 1990, serving as its director of spinal cord injury since 1994. And recently, congratulations, I saw this, being named its chief medical officer. I would typically spend the next time detailing these incredible things that my guest is involved in, but I got your CV and it's honestly, you've accomplished so much that it was impossible to narrow it down. So let's just say that you've quite literally written the textbook on spinal cord injury and helped create the guidelines both nationally and internationally for the standards that we use for the care of our spinal cord patients. So with that, Dr. Kirshblum, it's wonderful to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to spend time with you.
So, let's dive right in. Can you just kind of discuss your own personal journey to spinal cord injury? What drew you to it? If there were any cases that kind of stand out from your training that kind of hooked you early on and why you wound up here instead of any of the other variety of subspecialties you could have pursued within PM&R?
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to disappoint with the first question and answer. I was exposed to spinal cord injury as a resident. I had a really great residency training experience, but came out not wanting to do spinal cord. I came out wanting to do, my job was to develop a stroke program. I enjoyed musculoskeletal and loved EMG, and that's what I did. And so it's really quite interesting, and why I usually recommend that people get a really great broad balance within their training. After coming to Kessler Institute, where I came in 1990, at one time, all the spinal cord docs left. And I recognized, I always learned from my father that if you're going to have to do something, you might as well volunteer. So I said, okay, if you need someone to do spinal cord, I have some knowledge of it. I'm happy to do it until you hire people who will do it. And they said, okay, you'll do it. And that was 1992. And then as time got on, we became really busy. I took over the ventilator program from the person who started it. And then we started growing unbelievably. And I said, I think we need help. When are you hiring someone? And they said, can you hire people? We started hiring. And I said, I think you need a director. And they said, okay, you'll be the director. And of course, I came to love it and didn't want to go back to what I had been doing. Not that it was bad, but it was just, I love dealing with people with spinal cord injury. So you never know, right? As the saying goes, people plan and somehow there's other plans for people. So I'm really thrilled that that happened to me and was able to really develop myself within the field.
Everything happens for a reason, right? So I think it's incredible that was your journey there. Can you, what do you believe are the best parts of spinal cord injury? What gets you out of bed every single day? You've been at Kessler now for, I don't want to date you, but for longer than I've been alive, let's just put it at that. And so I think that it's incredible that, you've been at one place for this long, but also, what keeps you going this late in your career? And in contrast, kind of what's the hardest part about what your job is as a spinal cord doctor?
Okay, so there's a lot in there. I'll try to tackle a couple of those things that I recall. So I don't think that I'm at the end of my career, although I imagine that since some of my residents that I trained have already retired, perhaps I'm not quite at the beginning. I think what gets me out of the bed every day is the people that I work with. And that includes the patients, it includes the staff, includes the docs that I'm just thrilled that we are family. And I really mean that, family. The residents and the trainees, the spinal cord fellows. It's really unbelievable that when I think about the years of training, the people that have trained have developed so much with them. And what gets me out is because I just love it. Now, that doesn't mean that every single part of every single day is, flowers and everything else. Of course, there are going to be hurdles and challenges, but the goal is to try to overcome them together. And it's why I love where I've been and I love what I do. And I realize that there's a mission that we can accomplish together. And so, so that's really the thrill. And I hope that that continues. When it stops, I guess then it'll be time for me to go or someone will push me out. But for now, that continues. In terms of what I love the most and what I find the hardest, what I love the most is really not only the people, but the impact that you can have. I loved rehab, right? And I don't know if this is common, but I love rehab. And rehab and finding my home in spinal cord really fulfilled my dream of being able to accomplish what rehab is all about. The definition of rehab is to make able. And in spinal cord, we make people able. It doesn't mean I don't mean that I do it, but we do it. But it's from so many aspects, but it's also that long-term relationship. I have patients that I'm now following literally for 30 years. Whoever, it's the things that I talked about why I love going into rehab, and now it's living it. And that means seeing them grow up, literally going from being a high schooler to going to college, getting married, having families. So those are the greatest parts. The hardest, that's a challenge in itself, dealing with healthcare and dealing with the changes and trying to make sure that we can accomplish the goals, not my goals, their goals within the time frame. I think that's a hardship, but it's also a challenge. So hopefully we'll be able to meet those as well.
We'll dive into that part later on, because that's, I think, my biggest, as a future physiatrist now, it's very exciting to be able to say that now, it's no longer aspiring, but as a future physiatrist, but it is navigating that atmosphere of insurance and of advocacy. So we'll definitely dive into that at the end for sure. So let's kind of shift away from yourself now and get into, the spinal cord injury fellowship world. Are physiatrists required to complete an SCI fellowship in order to specialize in spinal cord medicine? And what are some of the benefits that completing that fellowship year kind of brings to a physiatrist?
So I think that there's a couple of ways to answer that. Certainly one does not need to do a fellowship in order to care for people with spinal cord injury. However, to become board certified in the subspecialty of spinal cord injury medicine, at this point, you need to do a fellowship. There was a time period where you can be grandfathered in with just experience and you can take the exam, but that time period is over and now you have to do a fellowship to become spinal cord injury medicine certified. And that certification does give you specific benefits in terms of, I'm not only talking about the educational knowledge, skill benefits that one can probably learn on their own without a fellowship itself, but in terms of running programs on your own, there are certain rules about being a fellowship director. If you're not board certified, you need to have a certain amount of training or experience. So there are some benefits. I think the greatest benefit, though, is to be able to spend time in really honing your skills in one patient population. And spinal cord injury is a diverse population itself. It's not only traumatic spinal cord injury, but non-traumatic spinal cord injury across the spectrum, whether it be respiratory issues, urological issues, cancer issues, as well as the emotional and other issues. So I think those are the biggest benefits of really living and experiencing, not just for a month or two, like you can do in a rotation. And the other key thing there is that when you're a resident and you're rotating in spinal cord, I know a lot of people say, well, I did spinal cord, I know it. You don't know it after a year of just doing a fellowship. But I always found that the greatest ability, I still think back and say, I have such respect for my residency program director, Dr. Jerry Weissman, and I still have issues where I think, what would he do in this situation? And I think the idea of engrossing yourself completely just in that year of spinal cord medicine, it gives you that experience, that mentorship to be able to go back and say, okay, how did someone deal with it? What could I have done better then? And really, that's what experience is you make mistakes, but learning from the mistakes so that you don't make the same mistake the second time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I've been struck by is that we don't get as much exposure to spinal cord injury, or really any specialty, as I had initially thought before residency. You think that you're involved in this, but there's so much to physiatry that 2 to 3 months of spinal cord could potentially be all that somebody gets. And so I had always just imagined, oh, I'm going to spend a year on spinal cord and a year on brain injury, and it's like, no, you only have 3 years total to get in a lot of different parts of rehab. So
I've oftentimes commented that it's the easiest thing in the world, and hopefully no one takes this the wrong way. It's really easy to be a bad physiatrist because you could just sort of wing it, because you've seen these patients, therapy for this, therapy for that. And we'll refer to these people. What is really challenging is being a really good physiatrist, because you have to be good at so many different areas. You have to learn spinal cord, brain injury, amputee, musculoskeletal, EMG, musculoskeletal ultrasound. But the point is that being a great physiatrist means you are valuable to the patients that you see. And I think ultimately that's really why we hopefully all went into medicine, and why we all went into PM&R, is to bring value to the patients that that come to us.
Absolutely. So can you discuss, one of the kind of, I guess, things that differentiates spinal cord fellowships or just spinal cord injury in the PM&R residency world from others is the model system. Can you discuss what the model system is, what it isn't, and kind of discuss why is it valuable? Is it something that we should be seeking out in a spinal cord fellowship? Does that vault a program higher than another just because it has the model system? So I'd love your insight on that.
So I think that just as a description model system, there are 14 model systems in spinal cord injury. There's 16 in brain injury that's funded by NIDLR, which is a government agency that supports and funds centers of excellence, so to speak. And it's mostly graded based upon research. The highest scores are for the research that you propose, but certainly clinical comprehensiveness and other aspects are important. I wonder if I'm going to surprise you with my answer here, but I don't think that being a model system is the end all be all, and that a person should look for a fellowship that it has to be a model system. And let me explain what I mean. There are only 14 model systems in the country. The fact that a place is a model system, kudos to them, and that is fantastic. They've deserved it. But there are more than 14 great spinal cord systems in the country. And so while I think that it is a good housekeeping seal of approval, and perhaps I'm dating myself with that terminology, it is not the only one. And I'm not saying this, people hear me say it and they say, oh, you must not be a model system. And I'm saying no, but thankfully, I've been, director of the models, co-director of the model system since the 1990s, and we've had it consistently across the board. But it's not the only thing that goes into where people should go. What it means is, yes, you're going to have volume, you're going to have expertise, and you're going to have research opportunities. So that is great. So you already know that when you're looking into it. But a program that can have all those and not be a model system that time around. So I think that that's just important to recognize. If I wanted just to say the right, just love me, love our program, I would say, yeah, of course you have to be a model system. But I don't think that that's fair for programs that are not model systems. They can be great. I don't know, I think I only tackled one part of the question.
That's okay. No, I think it answered it all. And I actually expected you to say that, believe it or not, because the times that I've met you, one of the most humble people I've met. So I can't imagine you saying anything differently, especially, all eyes on me. So for sure. Well, it's great to know, especially like you said, everybody might want to be part of a model system, but if there's only 14, it's great to know that that's not what dictates whether or not somewhere is great. So I'd like to, for the next couple of questions, kind of play a little make-believe and kind of go through the progress that a resident would make on their journey to a spinal cord injury fellowship. So we'll say that I know that I'm still a PGY 0 until July 1st, but I'm a newly minted PGY 2 now. And I think that I want to pursue spinal cord injury. What tips would you give me as a resident to, over the next 3 years, best position myself to be a competitive spinal cord injury fellowship applicant when my time comes around?
Wow, that's a really interesting, good one. I think you should just become his. Here's my short answer. Work hard and be nice. Ultimately, those are the most important things. You got to work hard. I think that you want to learn a lot. Don't just only learn spinal cord. You're going to be a great spinal cord doc if two things. One, you know brain injury, you know spinal cord injury, you know amputee, you know musculoskeletal, and you know everything. Number two, you're a great candidate if you know exactly what you want. So meaning that if you've gone through everything else and you still love spinal cord, well, that's even better. And third, you really want, your letters are critical. Letters that say, this person showed up and they dressed nicely. That's not enough to do it. You have to want to do more. Now, do you have to do research? I think it's helpful. You don't have to do mega research. I think you should get involved with something. Get involved with something from either a clinical perspective, a social perspective. Doing some volunteer work can always be helpful. Doing some research can always be helpful. I don't think that there's an absolute that you must meet that check the boxes off. Be yourself and do the best you can. And I think that will make you a great candidate for a fellowship.
I think that's some great advice. And I guess, can you describe what the application and interview process looks like? So, now I'm a PGY 4, I've done all the things, I've crafted my CV, I know I want to do spinal cord injury, and I'm submitting my applications. How does that process differ, if any, from the residency application process that, we go through as fourth year medical students? And if you can just kind of describe the match of spinal cord injury.
Sure. So thankfully, we now have a match. We began that a number of years ago. The application is not through a central system. You apply to each individual program. There's one application that is used for every center, but you apply individually. And the reason we did that is to save the cost for the candidates so that they don't have to go through a system. You still have to go through the match, but not through a centralized system. You send the application, your personal statement, board scores, although for a PGY 4, there still are board scores. For a PGY 0, 1, 2. They won't be board scores in the future. It'll be just pass, fail, and the letters of recommendation. For me, I always want the letters to be waived. Not every program director wants it waived. For this year, programs for the most part will be doing everything virtually. At our school, we've asked to only do virtual to make it consistent across the board. And so I would tell people, prepare, have mock interviews, be familiar with what how to do a virtual interview. And, just try to be yourself. You've been yourself for, let's assume that people are going to be in their late 20s by the time they're applying, or a little later. Just be yourself. You can't, if you try to fake it too much, if you try to memorize your answers, you're going to be caught.
Yeah, it's first of all, I appreciate hearing that there's some respect for people's wallets out there, because as somebody who just survived a match season myself, it was very expensive. So I definitely appreciate that. And I guess, so I know for pain medicine, you have PM&R and anesthesia and psychiatry. They're all trying to get into that realm. In brain injury, you have physiatry and you have neurology primarily. Does spinal cord injury, is it typically just physiatrists that are applying, or are we going up against other specialties as well?
Hi, so I should have mentioned that after the application process, the interviews, there is a match, and almost every program has agreed to stay in the match. The only exceptions are someone who's going to take their own resident, then they can pull them out of the match. In terms of the costs, I certainly understand the issues. I would say in spinal cord, it is open to others, right? If you read the board, so it is under the American Board of PM&R. However, it's open to other specialties. I would say every year there's usually one person who's a non-physiatrist. Sometimes there could be two. I think a couple of years ago there was two. Either someone graduating from internal medicine and neurology who can apply. And those are the fields that can apply for it. I've never seen a neurosurgeon apply for our fellowship. And you have to be you have to complete an American residency in order to be eligible. So even though we've had applicants from other countries, they're not eligible because they're not eligible to sit for the boards because they don't have a American residency program. So I think that it's not a lot of outsiders, but every year there's usually one or two.
Great to know. So flash forward, the match is over. We just matched your program. We're very excited to come and train under your guidance. What does that year look like? What does your fellowship year look like? What types of rotations does a fellow typically complete? And kind of what does the inpatient outpatient balance look like?
So our programs could be a little different from others. And from our perspective right now, we've had two fellows for many years. We continue to have two fellows. And I build it upon the interests of the fellow. You have to do X amount of inpatient, right? We follow the blueprint of the board. So you have to do a certain amount of inpatient. And then after that, it really is a variety of the things that interest you the most. In the second half of the year, it's easy to figure out because the person already then knows what type of job they want or what type of job they received, so they can focus in on that. And whether it be spending more time on consults, where we are part of a level 1 trauma center, so you could do consults there. It could be concussion clinics. It could be on outpatient spinal cord, spending more time outpatient cancer rehab, urology. I mean, I'm thrilled that I've been so lucky in my career to work alongside Dr. Todd Linsmeyer, who is the only person who is a urologist, a physiatrist, and a spinal cord injury physician. And so we've spent our entire careers together, hopefully for another 10 years at least. And then the fellows usually will spend anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks with him, depending upon what their next role will be like as well. They also get a tremendous amount of experience, but this is across the spectrum. Every fellowship will have the same with spasticity management, inpatient, outpatient, and then pediatrics, VA experience. So there's a whole variety that we don't leave it up to them. We certainly discuss on a consistent basis, but it's not an absolute formula that you must do this point in time. The only thing that's set in absolute concrete is the first 2 months, because that's usually going to be the rotation until we really get to know them well.
That's really incredible personalization. And I think that's a unique opportunity that is innovative for educational purposes across the board. The ability to, I don't want to say cater to interest, but to craft it around interests is something that I've never heard of before. So that's incredible. And you kind of had a good segue there, talking about what their future career is going to look like. So now we've flash forward another year. It's been great. We learned a ton. Got some great research with Kessler Institute done, and now we're looking to get our first job. And so, or I guess technically residency is your first job, but our first real job. And so we're looking at future career opportunities. What does that typically look like for a fellowship trained spinal cord injury doctor? What does compensation look like? Any unique benefits that you've seen kind of along the way? That type of information.
So I think it really depends upon so many things. One is the region of the country. You always really want location, as they say. Where do you want to be? And that's really where you want to start. Regionally, there's always going to be different type of roles. Number two, what is it that you like more of? Do you like more of inpatient? Do you like more of outpatient? Like more of consult? Now, not everybody can get a 100% spinal cord job after doing a spinal cord fellowship, depending upon where you go. And if you want to be in a small town, it's not going to be so easy to just be full-time spinal cord. If you're going to go to an academic center, it's going to be a lot easier. And also if you go to a VA. So I think that it really depends upon the personality, the interests of the person. I would say that most people, at least in my experience, has really gone where they wanted to go and the job that they wanted to go to. There aren't that many spinal cord specialists around. In terms of financial remuneration, on the one hand, the salaries I see keep going up, but I understand this. No one makes as much as they'd like to make. That's just the reality. It doesn't matter whether you're in spinal cord, brain injury, musculoskeletal, or in any field of medicine or job. But thankfully, I think that the salaries have been competitive, and people have been pretty happy with it as far as I can tell. There isn't a lot of movement from what I can see. I mean, there are more jobs that are opening every year. I do know that there's plenty of opportunities for their fellows right now, and hopefully that will continue 5 and 10 years from now as well.
Yeah, it's great to know that the job market is still there, and that it's not something that is getting diluted in terms of a lot of people kind of crossing over and taking some of our territory. And it seems like we are able to control that space as physiatrists, and we're not.
I just want to comment on that for 1 second.
Yeah.
I think that I always try to tell the trainees, don't worry about your competition. Only worry about yourself. Meaning, if you're good at what you do, meaning you're nice to people, you're nice to patients, you're nice to referrers, you're nice to everybody, and you're good at what you do, don't worry about the competition. Because the truth is, most people out there aren't very nice to others, don't give people the time of day, and so you will become known. So it doesn't matter to me so much who else is doing, who wants to try to encroach my territory, so to speak. They've got to match what you can do. And that doesn't mean that therefore you should walk around feeling, oh yeah, I'm really the best. But it means just give the people the time of day that they need, give them the care that they need, give the expertise that you've trained for, and don't worry about your competition.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So I guess, where do you see the future of spinal cord injury heading? When we talk about breakthroughs in medical research, everything that we see is on exoskeletons and regenerative, medicine and all of these types of things. Where do you see spinal cord injury heading? So if we're, 2035, where do you think we're reflecting on this time from recent innovations? Do you see exoskeletons taking that next step and being something that's accessible to a variety of patients rather than the ones that just have access to, elite centers? Or do you see, kind of where do you see the future going?
So that's really an interesting question, and it's my mind is going in circles with how best to answer this one. I think technology has been a tremendous boom for the field and for the people who sustain spinal cord injury, as well as other injuries, but we're talking about spinal cord injury. But no one should think for a second that technology is going to replace the need for specialists in the field. Where will exoskeletons fit in? I don't know. I thought the iBot was going to be the greatest thing in the world, and then it went out of business. Now it's back, which is great because it was fantastic. So, if exoskeletons could come back, it's here, but can come down in price that it's more people can get it, fantastic. But remember that exoskeletons is not the cure-all. Regenerative medicine is not cure-all. And believe me, I do research in all these areas, and it's not to say that I'm not optimistic or thrilled at how far we've progressed. But remember that the cure is not around the corner. And what we're going to do is that we're going to continue to incrementally improve patients' ability to function and their quality of life. But we still need to care for their medical issues and determine what is in the best interest for the patient with the patient. And only a specialist in that can make that determination. So I look at all of these as assets, not replacements for the skill and expertise of the spinal cord specialist.
Yeah, I did a rotation at McGee Rehab in Philadelphia, and they had placed, and talking about just technology kind of assisting us, they put Amazon Alexas in every single room of their spinal cord wing. And it enabled so much independence for their patients, because their patients now were able to say, hey, Alexa, raise my blinds. And all of a sudden their blinds were up. They didn't have to hit their call bell. They didn't have to ask a family member to do it. They just did it on their own. And I think that's where I'm really interested to see kind of how those assistive devices evolve as kind of smart technology takes off, is how can we make those incremental improvements to allow them to really grow. Someone that, and this is another great segue for us, you talked about incremental care changes and caring for our patients along the way. Someone that I've really come to admire is Judy Human, and now she's not a spinal cord injury patient, but she's still a wheelchair user, which a lot of our spinal cord patients are. And recently, she sent a tweet that she was thanking the airline that she flew on for not breaking her wheelchair. She said, I had to be transferred 8 times and nobody dropped me. I had my wheelchair on 2 different airlines and it didn't break. And it really struck me because, it's not something we necessarily think of, that, it impacts every single day for them. And it's such a burden, not necessarily just, flying, but just in general, accessibility issues for our spinal cord population. How do you think that we can do a better job as physicians to help with that advocacy for our spinal cord population and to make sure that they are consistently facing, having support in their corner for the issues that they face on a daily basis?
So first, Dr. Judy Human is really an amazing individual, and kudos to her for all of her amazing career and what she's done and what she's taught. This is an hour's topic, and so I'll try to encapsulate it, make it speed dating in terms of an answer. I think that physicians have sometimes become a little complacent in their advocacy for the people that they represent. And I think we have to understand and remind ourselves and remind myself, it's not just on others, it's myself too, that we're really trying to help people. So we can't push them forward, but we need to be there to back them up. Wheelchairs is a perfect example of the difficulty of people who need power wheelchairs, for instance, getting it. It's just unbelievable. And you think about just in terms of wheelchair technology and repairs. I mean, recent articles about how 50% of people, I think that was the number, need breakdowns, and it takes them a long time to get a breakdown. And the delays that it takes because of insurance issues. So I think that there's a lot for us to advocate on. We sometimes talk about, oh, well, this isn't right. I think we need to find a better way to work with our constituency. And I really applaud ASCIP and Asia working together on advocacy issues. And I think we need to find a way to go further with it. And I'm not criticizing at all. I'm saying that we just need to continue to work with the advocacy groups of the patient populations to see how we can work together to move things forward, to get it in the hands of Congress, political action, but also from a insurance action standpoint. I think it's really important.
One of the big things that I've noticed from the interview trail for residency was a lot of residencies talk about, we do a disability day where we, for a day we have to stay in the wheelchair and navigate our hospital and see, what obstacles we face in this wheelchair that we may not think of on a day-to-day basis that we now realize need to be fixed for better accessibility. Have you noticed any in your career, any other, I don't know if building empathy is the right word, but building awareness about some of those issues that programs can be doing a better job of, or a more innovative job of doing, rather than just saying, for the day you're going to be in the wheelchair so that you can experience what some of our patients go through, kind of what your thoughts are there.
Okay. Long story short. So I thought that was a great idea of putting people in wheelchairs. And so just in the last couple of years, we published a number of articles at our school where we have a mandatory clerkship in PM&R. And so I made every medical student go into a wheelchair and go through that. And what I learned from that is that it helped them a little bit, but it was nowhere near as effective as hearing directly from people with disabilities and hearing what their life is like. And what I'm really taking away from this is, and I'm restructuring our program with this, and I published with our residents and medical students on it, and we're restructuring it, and I'd like to bring this into the residency as well, is that we take care of patients, but we're taking care of them. And I have a feeling that we will learn more from them when we don't look at them as patients, but we look at them as colleagues. And we really want to restructure this year. What I'm doing is that it's going to be not you're the person in charge who are making decisions, but listening really to what the problems are, not the UTI, not the bladder, the bowel, but the impact of these things. And hopefully that when one can personalize it, it will make all the difference in the world. I know that when, I have a patient of mine who is a physician, not PM&R, and used to sort of joke about people that had chronic pain, neuropathic pain. And then they developed it. And all of a sudden their empathy for these individuals made it different. I'm not suggesting that we should therefore, take away the use of an arm or a leg from somebody. That's not going to, it's listening, it's feeling, it's really experiencing it like as much as you can, being in someone's shoes without it really being in it, that hopefully will make the difference to how we treat our patients and how we help them in the field as well.
Yeah, what drew me to physiatry in the first place is the team aspect of it. And as my clinical rotations began, one of the things that I really tried to internalize myself is the patient is part of the team, because if they're not engaged with what your plan is, it's not going to matter. And so I think that your statement about making sure that they're on the team is very important for every physiatrist moving forward. And it doesn't necessarily just have to do a spinal cord. It can be whatever it is that they're dealing with. Your therapists are on the team and social work is on the team. You're on the team, but the patient is the captain of that team and is the one that gets to drive that all.
Yeah, so I'll make one comment. You can edit this out if you'd like. I think that the team approach is really important, but hopefully it's not a misnomer for people. There has to be a leader of the team. And in my mind, the leader of the team is still the physician. The patient, though, is critical in terms of understanding. I can't tell the patient only what their goals are. They have to become engaged. They have to have that zeal and alacrity to really want to do it. And then you need all the team members on the same team. So you can't have a team with with one coach and 12 captains. So that physiatrist is really to make sure that they could get everyone together on the same page, but they have to make sure it's on the same page as the patient too. And that's really where, so it's not a freedom for all and saying, okay, everyone should go in that direction they want because we're a team. Teamwork, you're a symphony when everyone is playing the same tunes, even though doing things a little differently.
Absolutely. I love that. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. I've already taken 40 minutes or so, and I really appreciate everything that you've given us today. So kind of as we wrap up, I'm interested to hear about the reflections of your own career. So, you arrived at Kessler in 1990. Since then, you've created a career that is truly world renowned and everybody could aspire to. What advice would you give to those looking to either follow in your footsteps or even just step off and carve a path of their own? As your career has evolved, reflecting back, how anything you would have done differently?
No. So my rule of thumb, I learned this from my dad, is never look back. Once you make a decision, you make a decision because you've done the very best you can. You've taken in all the ingredients and all the information you can, you synthesized it, you analyzed it, and you came to a decision. And while that decision may not always work out exactly the way you planned it, it doesn't mean that you did things wrong. It means that, okay, you need to figure out a way to make it work. I try not to look back, and I appreciate you say about having a great career. I think that maybe a key to success is not looking back on it and not saying what I've done, but more importantly, what I'm hoping to do. You can't sit back and say, wow, I'm so proud of myself. That gets in the way. There's too much to be done. I think that there's meaning to the things that we do. And so this is sometimes that I love to think about from the perspective of, I don't look at myself and my successes that I've had, and thankfully I've had them, but it's more importantly, what meaning did I bring to the people around me and the people that I treat? And I think it goes back to that initial discussion that we had, which is what gets you up every day, and that's really it. It's not so I can accomplish one more thing and get one more thing on my CV. It's kind of make a really difference in the people that I see. But hopefully people recognize there is one thing that is important, and a lesson I try to tell people. When you dedicate yourself to medicine, you can't dedicate yourself just to medicine. Your dedication has to be across the board. You're going to be successful in medicine if you're successful in other aspects of your life. So dedicate yourself to patients and patient care and your colleagues and the people you work for, but dedicate yourself to your community, your family. Because if you're not good there, you're not going to be good in other places. You will for short periods of time, but you want to have a sustained career. And the key to having a sustained career is doing it incrementally. Don't try to grow too fast. Don't burn out too quickly. That burnout, that big word, it's because people have too much, they expect too much too quickly. Just grow slowly and enjoy what you're doing while you're doing it. And I think that will be hopefully the key to people's success in their future as well.
Thank you so much for that. I think that's a great jumping off point. So I want to thank you for joining us today. For all of you watching, I hope that this was as insightful for you as it was for me. If you want to learn more about spinal cord injury medicine, feel free to peruse the AOC PM&R's website. We're doing our best to update that with all the resources that you could need to pursue residency, fellowship, and your career afterwards. If you're interested in other parts of physiatry that might not be spinal cord, maybe you're trying to find out what you want to do, check out our interview with Dr. Jamie Key of University of Kentucky for brain injury medicine that we did last month. And next month, we're doing an interventional spine interview as well. So with that, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.